Hi, everybody. Wow, look at that. Is that an entire crowd of people that came to watch me?
Yes, it is.
That's so
Uh,
cool. Oh, I have my black belt t-shirt on. I meant to put my Sony shirt on. So obviously I'm working from home. I am a black belt. My name's Thomas Cubby. I'm a senior sales support engineer from with Sony Electronics and here to present about the new PXW FX9. Now I see me. Okay. This is my first time doing this type of web thing, so if I seem a little discombobulated, it's because I am. But we'll be fine. I have some really cool stuff to talk about. I have multiple screens that I'm looking at, so I may not always look into the camera. The configuration I have here is actually the FX9 going into our switcher, the MCX500. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment. And we're gonna, let's see, a PowerPoint here that I'm gonna pull up. Can we all see that switcher? So this is the MCX 500. This is a kind of an all-in-one switcher, has a multi-view output that I'm currently using connected to Sony Professional Monitor. And I also have a Ethernet connection going to my router, and then wirelessly from my laptop, I'm able to connect to that switcher. So when I am switching between pictures in the presentation, I'm literally doing instantaneous control of the switcher itself. Okay, so I don't know what picture we're on right now. I think we are on, oh yeah, we're on me. Okay, and then before we get started, I just wanted to take a little plug, promote our latest, newest website where you'll see stuff for FX9, stuff for Venice, and this would be on SonyCine.com. So type it in your browsers now, save it as a favorite. We put lots of cool content on there, updates, news, firmware releases, everything that pertains to our cinema cameras. You could see the B right here. I have Venice firmware and FX9 firmware and all about that. We will be talking about the FX9 firmware version 2 at one point in the presentation. And now I'll go back to me and we'll start talking about, oh, actually, let's do PowerPoint just a little bit. I promise it won't be totally PowerPoint. We'll switch back and forth. But there are some things to cover that I think are rather important. So we're going to talk about today the FX9, a brand new camera from Sony. We introduced this at IBC in 2019. The XDCA FX9, which is the extension unit, and a new cinema lens that's coming as well, and that is the FEC 1635 T3.1G. Okay, so FX9, it's using a lot of our same core technologies. Exmor R, that's the backlit, back illuminated sensor, so that has a lot to do with the great sensitivity of this camera. We are a one mount company when it comes to cinema cameras. From our mirrorless all the way up to Venice are all using that alpha mount. And of course, we're still supporting great codecs like XDCam and XAVC. What we've done with this camera is produce a camera that we took technologies from 3 different cameras and melded them all into one. So we've got everything great about an FS7, and that is a great camera, as most of you would agree. It is the most successful camera we've ever produced at Sony in the professional world in terms of camcorders. We've sold more FS7s than all of our Betacam cameras combined. And I know a lot of us go way back to the Betacam days, so that should tell you a lot. The Venice camera, which is really dominating the industry at the higher end with movies like Bad Boys 3, which was recently in theaters, and unfortunately, due to current circumstances, Top Gun was also shot in with Venice, using about 24 of them, including 6 in real fighter jets. And so this is, you know, Top Gun, I believe, was going to be a June release, but it's now December. And of course, our Alpha series cameras with the fast hybrid autofocus system, it's really, really fantastic. So the camera itself, full frame, 6K, 15 plus stops of latitude, a dual base ISO. I will have some slides that show that because I think it's important. Quick comparison with FS7. So you could see that the dynamic range is increased, and a lot of that is due to moving to the back illuminated sensor. Essentially here for the techie geeks, and you probably already know about Exmor R, we move the electronics to the reverse side for essentially eliminating that area that's blocking light from hitting the sensor. So the circuitry that's normally found on a CMOS sensor on top of the pixels that blocks the light is now kind of reversed in a sense, and that allows for the more light to hit the surface of the pixel. We do have a lot of things coming in terms of firmware upgrades. Anything you see with a asterisk is something that's coming with firmware. You could see by this slide that anything to do with the DCI spec, so 4096 by 2160, will be part of version 2, as will be 60p at full frame. Everything else, frame rate wise, we're good. And then you have the high frame rate modes. Also, things that are coming with the firmware upgrade would be the 150 and 180. And then in the Super 35 mode, we are doing something special with the extension unit, which you'll see, and combine that with the future firmware upgrade. We're going to be able to do a 3840 by 2160 10-bit raw out. That's 120 frames per second continuous. That's pretty powerful. Even if you're not interested in doing 4K DCI at normal frame rates, having this 120 is, I think, a pretty big game changer to have 4K and just record at will at 120 frames per second is pretty special. Okay, the fast hybrid autofocus system, we cover 96 vertically and 94% horizontally. So I'm going to break it up now and switch back to back to me for a moment, so I can give you a little look-see on how the fast hybrid autofocus system works. So I have the output of my camera. This is my web camera, is the FX9. And all my friends are jealous. So I'm going to turn on the display so we can see how the fast hybrid autofocus system works. I'm in my apartment, and you can see the settings of the camera. Right now we are in a 3840, 2160, 30 frames per second, and I'm in XABC as a record mode, but none of that matters now. I'm also, if you look in the lower left portion of the screen, I am using a neutral density filter, and I can do that because I have plenty of light in my apartment. I'm not using any studio lighting anywhere. I just basically have the lights on that are in my apartment. And yet, because I have a fast lens on there, a 1.4 24 millimeter G Master lens, I am able to add ND and still have good exposure. I didn't do a white balance. I kind of just dialed in real quick, fast. I can literally roll in any white balance. We'll show you that as well. But what I really wanted you to see is the way the fast hybrid autofocus system works is it's using two technologies for autofocus, and that's taken from our Alpha series cameras, where we are using phase detection, PHASE, and we're also using contrast focus. So phase detection is object recognition. It knows how far away the subject is. It goes to that point, and then it kicks in with the contrast for the accuracy. Here's my little bobblehead. I have a bobblehead somewhere. Oh, hang on. I had some props. So the cool thing about the face detection is it even works on bobbleheads. It should. Can you see that? I know everybody's going to want to shoot in bobbleheads these days, but it works on picture frames. I even had somebody tell me it worked on a holograph. So this is a really cool technology that's a game changer in terms of autofocus, because look, we're all professionals. I used to shoot. I was pretty good at manual focus. In fact, I didn't have autofocus when I was a shooter. And so there's a reluctancy to use autofocus. This camera will change that. Not for every application, but certainly for things like this where you're doing a sit-down interview and the person who's talking, it kind of like leans forward and then they lean back in their chair, and I'm shooting at 1.4. Imagine how easily I would go out of focus just moving forward and back a couple of inches or a couple of feet. But here we are staying perfectly in focus. I have it set up as face priority, so you can see this box around my face. That will change with version 2, and we'll go over the whole list, but we're actually going to have the ability to go to eye autofocus. So the same little square will now be just this big. So if you want to talk about focus accuracy, now we're really game changing it. So this is an amazing feature. I'm going to just step behind the camera for a moment and run through some of the focus parameters. I have this as a slide, but I like to show it more as a parameter of the camera. So it is a little bit different of a new menu system. Everything that has to do with shooting is under the shooting menu. Everything that has to do with your projects, your different modes of recording, your custom or Cine EI mode. So everything's a lot easier to get into from the menu on an FX9 than it ever was on an FS7. Okay, so as you can see here, I have my transition speed set for fast. I'm going to step in front of the camera, so I'll be behind it. But I have the transition speed set for fast, so the speeds go from 1 to 7. 7 being the fastest, 1 being the slowest. So this is how fast am I turning the focus ring, right? So if you want it real fast, I'm doing fast action, I need it to react very quickly. You would use 7 as the fastest. Number 1 you would use if you want something to resemble more of a rack focus in a cinematic production. So again, it's how fast am I turning the focus ring is the transition speed. And next we have is what's called the autofocus subject shift sensitivity. And it's a mouthful. It took me 6 months to say that without completely stumbling on all the words. So what this is, and you can see it's set for 1, which is locked on, is I can either lock on a subject with number 1 or go up to 5 where it will switch quicker. So this is the decision to switch to another subject. So for instance, I have a race car in the scene. It's the lead car. As it comes and approaches the corner where it leaves the screen, I would want it to switch to the next car quickly. So then I would have it on the fastest subject switch sensitivity. If I want to stay with a subject, I use locked on, and then this is going to allow me to stay locked on a subject, so even if something else moves in front of it, that subject stays in focus. Okay, wide focus areas, we have different focus modes, either wide zone or flexible spot. This is essentially giving you the ability to and it may not focus on me right now because we're not using the face detection. The wide is the whole screen. The zone is a smaller section, and then the flexible spot is going to be something you move around. Now, currently you move it around with a joystick, but version 2 is going to allow you to touch screen that. So when you combine that with the face detection will only go inside one of the focus zones. So when I touch the flexible spot on a face, it'll do the face detection just on that face. Okay, and then we also have face priority and face only. So face only is, again, the more parameters you have for an autofocus system, the more control you have as a shooter, and the more likely you are to use this feature in the camera. So what the difference with the two is that face priority is if there's a scene like this one, and I leave, the camera will focus on what's behind it. And I think it's doing that. But if I switch it to face only, so it's doing my face. And when I leave, it's not going to, or it shouldn't. Let's see my, hold on a second here. Of course, it's, just check something. Priority. Let's see more prominences. There's face priority. Face only. And the camera's a little wobbly. It's not quite tight on the tripod, so I apologize. So with face only, it's changing the box. Of course, it's making me look bad right now. But the way this is designed is that it won't focus on anything else once you leave the scene. And there might be another parameter I'm missing here on the adjustment. Focus is on. Okay, so we go back to presentation. Share. Back to here. Okay. All right, so here's what I was talking about with the face detection and all the different parameters. So you could see the different applications and how it would be used. This is the face priority, focus on faces when there are faces in the scene. And then the faces only, no other objects. So the way you would use this is I'm doing people walking at the screen, and as they leave the scene, if I'm on face priority, it'll switch focus to the scene that they just left. If you have it on face only, as they walk out of the scene, that scene stays probably out of focus if you're using a really shallow depth of field, because it was focusing on faces coming way close to the camera. And then there are some focus assist and one push functions as well. This part here, I'm going to switch to my camera on my switcher, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we can do using some of the new functionality. And of course, this is all based on feedback from what we received from FS7 over the course of many years. And So now we will switch back here. Okay, so this is my camera set up in my apartment. I'm shooting at it with a PXW Z90. And oh, by the way, I just did a tutorial video on the Z90 on how to do streaming to Facebook, Vimeo, and YouTube. So, go check that on YouTube. It's a pretty helpful tutorial, and it's a very cost-effective way to do live streaming. It even does the RTMP-S, the secure stream that Facebook requires. And it's pretty simple to do. It's just a couple of minutes of a tutorial. I don't get into the details of Facebook and the other platforms, but I do get into all the settings for the camera. So here on the camera is, and hopefully you can still hear me well, the body of the camera. So one of the things we can do is use this multi-function wheel along with these buttons here. Okay, so then as I press, we'll say white balance on my screen, as I turn this wheel, and I'm going to switch back to the camera, and I may be stepping in and out of the screen. So now you could see in the lower left corner that the white balance is selected. That'd be right here. Ha. Okay, and now what I'm gonna do is just roll that white balance so you'll see the changes occur in real time. And this was a huge request. You can see I'm probably going to look very orange now. Yep. This was a huge request with the FS7 having to go into the menu to always select and change your white balance, not only in the custom mode, but in the Cine EI mode, where we shoot cinema-like. The FS7 was limited to 3 white balances, 32, 43, 55. And then you would tweak those in post in your grading process, but customers wanted to be able to have full control in the field and get the white balance completely accurate there, and then if they still needed to tweak it. So on the FX9, just like I did here, I can dial it in, and I can do that whether it's in preset, white balance A, B, custom mode, or Cine EI mode. So I have full control of that white balance. I am gonna roll myself back so it doesn't look like I put too much fake suntan lotion on. Although there is some mixed lighting in my apartment, so I don't know how perfect the white balance really is. Right? I can do the same thing with ISO and gain. Now in this instance, we're in a gain mode. And I have it on gain for a specific purpose, and that's basically so you could see what the camera is. It's actually way overexposed. I'm at 17 dB of gain, but the camera has what's called a dual base ISO, and I will show you a slide on that, but I want to demonstrate a little bit of what that can do. So I have an assignable button. If you look on the, see, it's on this side right here, right there. It says base low. And when I press the assignable button, I can go to base high. So this camera has 2 base ISOs. The numbers that you see, the measured numbers that you see, are actually going to be in the Cine EI mode, and we'll switch to that mode. Those numbers are 800 and 4000. In the Cine EI mode, or pardon me, in the custom mode, I'm using a color called S-Cinetone. And the S-Cinetone is a new color space that we created based on the Sony Venice color science, which has made that camera so successful. I'm going to bring us back down. I'm going to switch us to the ISO mode. Okay. Now, I know a lot of shooters are huge fans of shooting in ISO versus gain. Me personally, old school video guy, I was more familiar with shooting with gain because I knew exactly what no amplification of the video is at 0. And back then, in the 90s, there wasn't really, unless you were shooting film, you weren't using ISOs at all. So I still have that mentality, and I understand the reasoning behind ISOs, but when you change the ISO in this video mode, you're not changing the sensitivity of the camera. You're basically boosting the video image, right? You're turning up the brightness, and you're increasing the noise level along with that. With this dual-base ISO system, we are literally able to change the sensitivity of the camera. And I'll now switch to that Cine EI mode so we can see what we're talking about. Again, the menu system is very easy to get to. So under Project, Base, Custom, Cine EI. And now we are in that Cine EI shooting mode. We are going to just check our LUTs. And we have the 709 LUT, S709, and then the LUT setting we're going to turn on for our external outputs. Okay. So right now we are in, if you look along this side of the screen, you can see we are in XAVC S-Log 3 with the S709 lookup table applied, and we have a base ISO of 800. Now you can see because I have an ND filter on, that we're sort of losing brightness here. So I'll turn that off. And focus is now the face detection should also work in the focus in this mode as well. There's my face. Yeah. Okay. So in this mode here, you could see my exposure index is really only set to 400. 800 would be the proper So this is the base sensitivity of the camera in Cine EI. Okay. Now, probably a little overexposed at this point and the white balance is off. But you can see I've got really good sensitivity at 800, and that's a native base ISO. Now I'm going to switch it to the high mode. And again, I have an assignable button. And you see I got significantly brighter. We're at a base of 4,000. I can kick in my variable ND. And hold on 1 second. My camera is coming off the tripod, so close your eyes for a second while I just tighten up my camera. Okay. Okay, now we won't get any more wobble. Right. So now I can engage my variable ND filter, and I've got here an image where I can really crank up my. Now here's where being on site is a much better experience, because you're not going to really be able to see image quality here, but I'm obviously much darker now, and my brightness levels, override the focus there. So as I now go to my ISO gain, and I can boost that level up. We're now at 12.8, and there isn't, and I don't know if you can tell with this platform or not, but on my end it's still really clean. I'm looking at a BVM monitor, and I don't really see a huge amount of noise. But the idea is when you switch from 800 to 4000, you actually don't see any difference. It's so minute, the noise level change, you don't see the difference. You could probably measure it, but you're not going to see it. Your dynamic range stays the same. So we'll go back to sharing for a moment. I don't know why this doesn't just stay out, but it doesn't. Okay. So we talked about the there we go. So here's our dynamic range, right? So with our dynamic range, you could see in the 800 base here, we have at the native base ISO, we have 9 under and 6 over. And then we go over here to our 4000, which is our high base ISO, and we still have 9 under and 6 over. So the beauty is I've got this really low sensitivity ISO of 800 that's perfect for brightly lit outdoor scenes, especially if you're using a really fast lens outside. Combine that with a electronic variable ND, that's the same one that's on the FS7M2 with slightly different functionality, improved in fact. And I can utilize that combination so I can get perfect exposure on the brightest days, especially on something like this where the sun is reflecting off the snow and it's just so bright out. Using that low base and not losing the dynamic range that I need is really going to come in handy there. Now I move over to the 4000 when I have those lower lit scenes, those candle lit scenes, low light you don't have any control over, the fireplace scenes or cityscapes, anything like that, where now I can jump to that 4000 and still be in the same dynamic range, and I'm going to get 9 stops under. Now the beauty is too, you have dynamic ranges that overlap. If you look down here, this 800 goes to 3200. The high range goes from 1000 up to its native. So you can see there's a pretty nice crossover where 32 is here and 32 is here. So I can, let's say I want to shoot at a 2000 base ISO. I'm probably not going to go to 800 and jump it up to 2000. Instead, what I'm going to do is move to my high base ISO, drop to the 2000 here. I'm actually having less noise in my image by starting with the higher sensitivity base ISO and then shooting at my 2000. So there's a lot of flexibility here where I'm going to benefit and profit from that, especially like if I want to capture more on the other end of the spectrum. If I want to capture more on the higher end of the highlights, I can go up to these areas here as well and still maintain a good dynamic range. So where are we now? Okay, so we're on the S-Cinetone and the gamma. So with this new S-Cinetone, it is, again, using the experience that we acquired when we produced our Venice camera and literally flew in a whole bunch of colorist engineers from Japan into Hollywood, met with all the Hollywood folks, and they said, what do we need to do to get this camera as like a leader in the Hollywood industry? And basically hammered out what good color was for film. And we produced that with the Venice camera. So we took the same experience and we developed the same color type in the FX9. Now, we have the two modes of operation. You have the S-log mode where you apply a gamma curve, and that is the S709. So it's a similar curve to what's on the Venice camera. And then we have the baked-in look. So not everyone is experienced with applying a look to the image in post, and a lot of folks are turning projects out quicker than normal, if not all the time. There are those occasions when you have to get a project out quicker and you don't have the time to turn around a full-blown color grade. This S-Cinetone, based on the feedback that I've gotten, is I think one of Sony's best color developments ever. And people really love this look. It's got nice, smooth transitions within flesh tones. It handles all types of flesh tones really, really well, and nice highlight roll-off. So it's really designed to emulate as close as possible a cinematic look within a video color space. And so it's significantly better than a standard Rec 709, which we all know is based on technology way back when. I don't know if it was 50s or whatever. I don't have the timelines all available, but we all know that that Rec 709 is very limiting with today's cameras. Excuse me. All right, so a few other things we'll cover. Image stabilization is, just pardon me, I gotta get a sip of water. My apologies. Okay, so just like on a real presentation, right at this point in the presentation, I would be asking somebody for a bottle of water, although it was probably already provided. So we're doing something different with image stabilization. We are, in a sense, capturing information that's in the camera already. There's a gyro built into the camera, and that will be used with lens information. So this will only work with Sony E-mount lenses. But the beauty is I can use a Sony E-mount lens that doesn't have image stabilization in it, just gives me lens information like focal length, records the gyro information into the metadata, and then using Catalyst Browse, which is a free application. The Prepare is an upgrade, so that one is paid. This is a free one. And using that, I really want to get this into full screen here, but I know when I switch to that, it's gonna, oh, there we go. Okay. So when I'm in this mode here and I capture that, you can see some of the What'll happen is I can do image stabilization within Catalyst Browse, and I can correct or stabilize the image much, much faster than I can with how would I say this? So with NLE, the types of NLE image stabilization technology they use, they have to actually analyze the image first and then they stabilize it. So when we're talking about efficiency, it's about 600 times faster than what an NLE can do with its image stabilization tools. Now our goal is to actually get this as a plugin into our third-party partners, because we are, we do partner up with all the majors and we're in constant communication. So the idea is to be able to open up your favorite NLE and then pull this in so that you don't have to make it a two-step process. But even as a two-step process, it's so fast. A 1920 1080 60p 6-second clip gets corrected in 0.1 seconds. Like before, as your finger's coming off the mouse clicker, it's already done. So really, really powerful tool that way. And I'm going to just go a little backwards here to this one here. When we talk about the ND filter control. So we changed it up a little bit from the FS7, and I'm going to switch over to my camera in just a moment. And so what we are doing with the variable ND filter, if you're not familiar with the way it works on the FS7, is that we are dropping in an LCD panel, a full-size LCD panel, and we are able to change the voltage on that to change the neutral density. The beauty is we're doing all of that without any color shift. So we introduce the LCD. We have a dial. That dial, and where is my mouse? If you look in the area where the aggregation of ND filter is, and I'm going to switch over to my camera as soon as I switch over to this camera. We'll switch out of this back to here. Okay. I think I'm getting a little bit of a hang of this. Good. All right. So this dial here is my variable ND filter. So once I engage it, so it's a plus or minus for the engage. And I think you saw that happening earlier. If I disengage or engage, this is what you see. And then as I turn that dial, I can scroll through my variable ND in 1/3 stop increments. So that is gives you the ability to do a nice, smooth, rolling aperture control, but it's not aperture. It's like iris control, but your depth of field doesn't change. Okay, this is another game changer. This is a technology Sony's been doing for quite some time. So we do have a really good grasp on how to do this. The nice thing too is there's this auto button. So switch back here to the camera. Using the auto button, I push and hold, and then this lights up. Now, all of the auto buttons that you see here, if I push and hold them, I actually have to then manually move them using this wheel to that auto mode. So no more do you have to worry about accidentally hitting a button and having it go into a auto mode. Okay. Let's see. And then there's also presets. So if I flip the switch over the presets like I just did, and I go back to my camera, now when I hit the ND, I'm actually adding presets. Now I could actually do, I think I could do an effect here. If you give me a moment to just choose a pattern with my switcher. I can figure out the quickest way to get to one of these. I think I can do an effect where we have a split screen. Yeah, there we go. All right, so using the switcher, I've created this switch screen. So now you could see the effect as I push the button on the camera. You could see the presets change. Now if I switch it over to variable, now you could see as I roll, oh, I'm in auto, I have to take it, come out of auto. Okay. As I turn the dial up, I'm kind of rolling with my finger so I get the full range. You could see how you have full, complete adjustment of the variable end. Okay, so again, a white balance, I use to press here and roll that. The gain, I press here so I can adjust my ISO. And I can do that with shutter, and I can do that with iris as well. Okay, so we'll switch back to another part of the camera I want to show you, which is the audio. So I'm going to zoom in with my other camera here, and we're going to just take a look at the audio section of the camera. We have this little panel, and on that panel, you can see that we now have 4 pots on the side of the camera. Original FS7 series camera, only 2. The other 2 adjustments had to be done within the menu itself. And then you could never put wireless audio in channels 1 and 2. They always had to be 3 and 4. Here, I actually have routing switches next to your auto and manual buttons, and those routing switches allow me to choose from 3 different sources. Built-in XLRs on the side of the camera, which are in the same spot as an FS7. The hot shoe, which is also same spot as an FS7, and now off of the new extension unit, which you'll see shortly. We do support drop-in wireless for both our UWP and DWX wireless audio systems, and those will be available. The support for that will be available with firmware version 2. Okay. So we've covered our audio portion. Some other really nice things about the camera. They're subtle things. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but I really do like some of the simple design changes we've made. See this big LED strip? That is designed so the operator can clearly see if I'm in record mode or not. So I certainly don't want to eject the card prior to it turning green. Now, previous models, that big green strip was a little green dot. And so I guess a lot of folks could tend to overlook it. Of course, you don't want those giant lights in the way while you're shooting, so it's just a small green dot when you close the door. But as soon as you open a door, you have this big warning saying, I'm not ready yet. Okay. Now the mount of the camera is very similar to the FS7 series. see if we can get a shot of that. We got some heavy windows behind it, so you will see some very bright light coming into play. Okay, so the mount itself is a locking style E-mount. The way that works is you have in the upper right part, where right around 2 o'clock, 1 or 2 o'clock, you'll see a release. So that's right up here. And that release, once you turn this ring in this direction, that release comes down and prevents you from turning this ring all the way in the other direction. So you cannot accidentally dismount the lens. This is the same design that's in the FS7M2. It's also designed to handle heavier weight lenses because the FS7 series and now this camera are so popular, and cinematographers want to use nice glass, really nice glass with these cameras. That heavier glass was difficult to support with the original FS7, but the new design change allowed for that to occur. I am actually a little off of my white balance with this camera. So as I put the lens on, you'll see there's a white dot on the lens, and I'm going to line that white dot up with the other 3 dots. Of course, I have to press the release first, turn the ring. Mounting is pretty simple. Again, align the white dot, make sure it's flush, turn the ring counterclockwise, and we're locked in. Okay. Other side of the camera, no different really than an FS7, except for one major function that we added that was a huge request. As you can see, we have Timecode and Genlock built right into the body. This was probably the #1 request for FS7 because it did not have it in the body. You had to purchase the extension unit in order to get Timecode. It was a pretty good, pretty pricey accessory to just have Timecode and Genlock. And so we made good with this new model and we built it right into the body. Also notice the multi and remote in the upper right hand corner. So up here, we are using the same type of smart grip, albeit we took the smart grip from an FS5. Let me zoom out here for a moment. And, right. So you had the smart grip from the FS5. Let me come out wide. I should just put this on. Okay. So this is the smart grip from the FS5. We took that smart grip because people said it was more comfortable. It had more tactile feel on the buttons here, and it had the direct menu access. And then we took, instead of using the 2.5 millimeter, we put a USB multi. So that's going to go here, leaving still a space for an additional remote to be attached. And we have an accessory called the RM30BP. that you can then do some remote control, leave the operator to still do camera functions like zoom and focus, but then the remote control person can do things like iris and white balance and things like that. Okay. So let's switch over to me. Oops, there's my messy apartment. We weren't ready for that one. Just switching the camera back over to me. We're going to switch back over to the Cine EI or the S-Cinetone mode. Okay, so I have here the extension unit. This is the XDCA FX9. It has the slot for drop-in wireless. It has two USBs for our dual link support for streaming and FTP file transfer. So this is compatible or will be compatible with firmware version 2 in the fall. And that's compatible with our XDCam Air system, which, oh, by the way, if you're wanting to check out how that works, we are doing like free trials until the end of June, given the current circumstances. We have two power taps, very popular D-tap, as well as a Heros. I think I'm saying that correctly. I hear Heros, I hear Herosi, I don't know. So right there. And then V-mount here. So this is the BPL FL75. That's one of our compatible batteries for that. I'll snap right on there. You can also use 4-pin XLR. Your raw output is here. It does have the additional Timecode Genlock that makes it easier to connect there once this is on. This camera does take up more power than the original FS7. It's about 35 watt power draw versus about 24 with the FS7. So this extension unit, it's available now, but the firmware that activates the wireless audio and the compatibility with XDCam Air and the raw out, which we talked about earlier, that's all coming with firmware version 2. Okay, so let's just zip back to our slides just to make sure I didn't miss anything really important. It's certainly in this platform a little bit like a duck out of water. Okay. So we talked about the electronic variable ND. Brand new viewfinder. It's brighter and sharper. Original viewfinder was 960 by 540, so we've nearly doubled the resolution going to this new one. And the new functionality for the EVF2 is really nice. It slides on and off like a tongue and groove, very similar to our ENG cameras. Here's the grip, again, more comfortable, USB multi-interface, so it does interact with the lens much faster. Now, I didn't mention the lens. The lens is the kit lens, the original kit lens from the FS7. That is the SELP, P for power zoom, SELP 28 to 135 G master, not G master, just G. SELP 28 135 G. Now, a lot of folks didn't like it on the FS7 for several reasons. They course, didn't think it was wide enough, and it's a full frame lens, so completely understandable with that. With the FX9 being a full frame sensor, we, of course, can take advantage of the full width of the lens. And then also the speed control of the zoom. So here you can see that lens in this picture. The speed control of that lens with the FS7 was not as good as it is using the FX9 with the multi-interface. It's a faster communication to the lens, so it's much more responsive. The third thing is something that we couldn't change because it's the physical design of the lens. The lens itself does not have the ability to mechanically zoom. It is by wire, so you don't get those really fast snap zooms. We did change that when we developed or introduced the 18 to 110. That's the kit lens for the FS7M2. But of course, that's a cropped lens, so if you did use it with the FX9, it would only be when you put the camera into Super 35 mode. Speaking of, you saw in these previous slides that we did have that capability of both full frame and Super 35. The great thing is this sensor is a 6K resolution sensor. So when we are in full frame, we are scanning 6K. So you're getting all that extra color information. And then we are scaling it down to 4K for the recording using the same exact codecs on an FS7 series camera. When we switch to Super 35, the sensor drops in the middle down to a Super 35 size. And of course, we lose the extra resolution, but we are still scanning at 4K. So we're scanning the exact amount of resolution that we would be if we were using an FS7 series camera. So two different scan modes. You can still take advantage of using all of that Super 35 glass that's out on the market until the full frame market catches up in terms of cinema glass. Of course, we do have some new lenses coming out. It is going to be a while. I'm sorry for the quick switching. I want to actually switch to the lens since we're talking about it. Now that lens is actually combining technologies of, or functionality, I should say, of traditional cinema lens operability, meaning accurate manual focus and iris ring, manual zoom capabilities, along with a lens that's also capable of doing autofocus, power zoom, remote operation, and at a very high quality. It's being marketed as a G lens, but it actually has G Master quality glass on the inside. We didn't want to confuse the marketplace with another G Master lens, but it does have G Master image quality. The first one to be introduced is this FEC 16 to 35. Excuse me. It is a T3.1, and unfortunately, I believe, with the current circumstances going on, the initial delivery or is going to be later than we expected, but it will be, I believe, fall/winter timeframe for this particular lens as we speak. Okay, so we'll just to reiterate our firmware update plans. We do have these major things coming with firmware version 2. It will be in the fall. Some other updates coming: auto eye focus, the ability to do quick changes in settings using the status menu. So let me switch back over to the status menu because this is pretty interesting, and I don't have any actual images of it, although I think I could probably play a a video on YouTube, or you could just look for that afterwards. FX9 firmware updates, and there's a nice little video. I don't think it's going to play back so well here, but with this new upgrade, let's see. I'll switch to the status page, and then we'll switch to turn off sharing. Sorry for the play-by-play, but at least you know what's going on. And you can see there's a status page of different items. And now these items will be a different color when the firmware version comes. They'll actually be yellow. And as they are yellow, though, that signifies the items that can be changed. So for instance, the base sensitivity will be yellow, so I'll be able to use a touchscreen interface and touch that in order to change the settings within it rather than having to go into the menu. And that's a very, very powerful way of adjusting the camera. People were asking for a signable button to switch the frame size. We didn't do that. Instead, we made it part of the same way to adjust using the status page. And the great thing about that is, if I'm on a status page and there's this page here specifically is going to be where most of the changes are going to be made. If I come out of that and then back into it, it actually goes right back to that same page. So as far as expediency goes, there's very little time being wasted in terms of being able to make really fast changes. So I will switch back to the sharing. Just to make sure we covered everything. Okay, yeah, so we do have control with smartphone. This is using our free app called Content Browser Mobile. Search Content Browser Mobile on either iOS or your Google Play. Don't search CBM, you will not find it. It will be more of a Christian broadcast application. But here, if you search Content Browser Mobile, you have the ability to connect to the camera. It's a one-to-one. And all those items you see in the frame to the right, those will allow you to adjust all those parameters using your either cell phone or tablet. That is either, again, Android or iOS. And that's a really nice functional feature. The Content Browser Mobile app is actually way more powerful than that when you're utilizing the camera's ability to do FTP file transfer. You can literally go in with Content Browser Mobile and access files that are on the camera and select those files to be sent to the FTP server, and that information is already input into the camera. So you're just basically viewing clips, choosing the ones you want, and sending those clips out. You can also set the camera to auto upload, so as each clip is closed, so you're recording, you hit pause. As soon as that file closes, it can be sent up to your FTP server. You can send proxy or high-res files. Just kind of going through a little bit of these. There's so much more the camera can do. I don't know how much time everybody has and wants to stay on. I can certainly go through more menu settings, but as far as the main functions of the camera, we've covered those. And it's really quiet, so I don't know if everybody can still hear me or somebody's responding. I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, so let me come off of the status page. I hear a voice now. I don't know if that's Mark.
Yeah, that's me. We haven't heard any or seen any responses for questions yet. So I'm looking to wait about 15 more seconds to see if they come in.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, there's lots of little things within the camera we can run through in the menu, but as far as like, here's what the FX9 is and what it's capable of doing, it's, you know, certainly we got a lot covered. You know, there's things like, we know we can do proxy recording up to a 1920 1080. That proxy can be with 4K or with HD. We can also do separate from the, so turn proxy off, and now I could do a 4K and an HD recording to the XQD memory to the same card at the same time. And then there's other functions of the card like either relay recording or simultaneous recording or independent recording, where I can have one record trigger, record card A, and another one record card B. So I can start A, let that roll through and cover this entire event, and then B, I'm just using to adjust to capture little clips along the way.
Let me ask a side question. How well does it record to separate monitor recorder devices?
I mean externally?
Like the external ones, yeah.
Unless you're doing RAW, I really don't see the need for it, because you are, you know, getting a very high quality recording with the XAVC codec. It is a 10-bit 422 in 4K 60p. But if you did want to go out to an external device, the popular ones is, I don't want to mention names, but we do have, I will mention one name because they're the ones that'll be recording our RAW, and that's Atomos. So you could use an Atomos to just capture the SDI out. The SDI can actually send a 4K 60p out. It is a 12G out, and it will do 3G as well. We are adding 6G with the firmware upgrade as well, so you'll be able to do 4K at 24 and 30p as well.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at. People that have those devices already, they can utilize them with these cameras.
Yeah, and HDMI will send out HD or 4K, so either one works just fine.
Okay, I don't see any other questions coming up here, but I did want to say, I was going to introduce you and everything for it, and you jumped right in. You're so excited to do this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, but it's like, yeah, sorry.
Don't apologize. That's
I would rather be introduced than have to introduce myself. But again, this environment is a little new for me. I've been on a bazillion Zoom calls and WebExes and stuff talking to people. And I have done, actually, if you know, somebody wants to see a standalone camera demo and run through everything, all the menu settings, the whole bit, I've done that too. And I can certainly accommodate those requests for, you know, whatever purpose that might be.
Well, I appreciate that. And Jimmy, you're on the line too. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think one of the big draws with this camera is that it, of course, you really get showcasing its potential and all the cool features that are available with this camera. The best thing, of course, is to be able to get in hand and play with it to go even further. So, no, Tom, I appreciate your the presentation. You did a really good job with the live production. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And again, everybody, that was Tom Cubby. He's a senior sales support engineer for Sony. He's been extremely helpful with us at the university, to other universities and other businesses and entities. He takes the time to meet with you, go over the camera. It's great. So feel free to reach out to us if you want another demonstration, something going further in detail on the menu. We'll work with them to set up something along those lines. And as we move forward, if we find any more information about firmware updates and release dates for them, we'll let you know. So again, Tom, thank you very much for taking the time this afternoon to go over the camera. It was very informative, very in-depth. I really appreciate that. And Jimmy, thanks for jumping online as well. That will be it. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to be here to help support.
And that will be it for today's presentation. We have another one coming up on Tuesday, and it should be the last one for this month. On Tuesday's demonstrations from Evertz, and they're going to do a demonstration on working from home and some of the capabilities you have with that Evertz has come up with for it. So again, thank you all for coming today. We're going to end this session. It will be available online on our YouTube page later this evening. And for any question to us at SMPTE, and we will answer them as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.